What's going on, guys? We're here back at the Big Kids Foundation with the main man, Coach Malcolm Phillips, with some impressive stats, some impressive stints with some teams in the UK, dating back to the London Ravens for 8 years. Part of the first GB squad that played their international game against France. Played both outside linebacker and DB. Took part in DB clinics with guys like Dan Marino. That's impressive, man. I gotta say, Dan Marino's name just, it rings bells. So to be able to have that kind of accolade is very, very impressive. But not only that, winning multiple titles with the London Ravens too, who were a powerhouse of a team. Coach, thank you for joining us today. And talk to us about your initial introduction into the game of American football.
Well, I was a basketball player.
Uh-huh.
I played a lot of years.
Point guard?
I was a point guard. Okay. Yeah. I got a little disillusioned when I was playing in London, and I was looking for another opportunity. I'd always wanted to play American football. I saw it advertised on Channel 4 after the matches that they were showing.
Yeah.
They were saying, there was a new team starting. It was going to be in Hyde Park. So I went along, and that was it. I was hooked from the very first training session.
And that team became the London Ravens.
That became the Ravens.
Wow.
And, that was 40 years ago. Wow. This year. So.
The Ravens holds the name holds weight. So when we talk about the Olympians or the Strength, like it holds a lot of weight. Take us back to obviously becoming the London Ravens and looking back at your career, because you've done some amazing things. Like I said, won titles, travelled to the US to beat a US-based team on their own Air Force on the 4th of July, which I can't imagine how that would have felt for those guys. But for you yourself, coming from basketball into the sport of American football to being part of the London Ravens, the historic London Ravens, how did that impact your life?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
I think, well, you can imagine, I was a young guy. I was 22. This is in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And London was a very different place then. To start with, London was on fire.
Yeah, you're right.
There was, the place that we're sitting in now, this was built after the riots in Brixton.
Wow.
This came out of kind of reparations afterwards. They said, we've got to do something for black youth.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Fantastic.
So, I was an angry young man. And American football was a fantastic outlet.
Yeah.
Yeah. London was also, I grew up in the north of England.
Okay.
I came from Leeds.
Okay.
And coming to London, it can be a bit of an isolating place and a bit tough. So finding the London Ravens and coming together as a brotherhood and doing something as tough as American football, to make it to the Ravens was hard.
Yeah, fact.
We routinely might get 120 people at training. The maximum, and people don't believe me, but one time when at the height of it, we had 400 and something people turn up to try out for the Ravens.
Unheard of.
And every year back then, you had to announce your roster at the start of the season.
Yeah.
And you could only carry so many players in. So if you played for the Ravens in one year and we were national champions, the next year you weren't guaranteed. Wow. So you had to fight every year for your spot.
Yeah. Why do you think that stopped them? Because I feel like that makes
it tough.
Yeah. It's tough and more competitive as well. You
really
can't just
competitive.
pick players up halfway through a season. Yeah. This is your roster that you're going into the season with. And the guys that don't make it then now have to try and find another team. Yeah. Which then makes those teams a little bit better than they should be. So
you really had to fight to become it meant something to get there. So what it meant for me was it was a real challenge.
Yeah.
It was exactly what I needed as a young man. It gave me friends for life. On my phone, I'm still talking to the Ravens. We have our WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
We're all talking. We're meeting up. We're talking about, which game we're going to go to watch this week.
Yeah.
What's happening, and always trying to meet up. When we can, we're pretty bad at doing it. But for me, it was an important opportunity to find myself, to find community.
Yeah. And you said something about it was hard because, again, the London Ravens, like I've said it multiple times, are one of the greatest teams that the UK has ever had, right? So you mentioned obviously making it into the team, you were never guaranteed the next season.
No.
What does that have to say to your work ethic and the work ethic you had to continue to have to be a part of the team for so many years?
It's something that I love about sport. That there's always lessons that go along with it, and there's some sports are better at what they teach. I was just with a group of young guys last night, and I just watched them play basketball, and then I was running a group with them.
Okay.
And I had to talk to them about, don't you guys pass? As a point guard, I would love to get through a game.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be, you know, as I said to them, at least 12, 15 assists every game.
Yeah.
That's what I'm focused
Yeah.
on. I'm not worried about my
Points
stats,
and-
points, but you know, but they just like to play 1-on-5.
Yeah.
They take care of them. But with American football, the lessons that it taught me about, you know, resilience, putting up with disappointment, you know, with having to, nobody had to, the work that I had to put in the winter, the discipline I had to do in order to make sure that my body was prepared and that I was prepared to give myself the edge. It meant that when it came to it, I could feel proud of myself.
Yeah.
Whereas I see a lot of people they just want to wear the shirt.
It's very different right now.
And now they say, well, I've paid my subs.
I want my shirt.
I need to be on the field. Whereas then, you could pay your subs all you like, but if you
doesn't guarantee nothing.
So you got what you worked for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And talking of being proud of yourself, you obviously took part in the Summer Bowl, where you guys won the national championships as well. And I'm just piecing everything together. And like we said, the game is quite different right now. For one, there definitely aren't 400 or anything between 100 to 400 people coming to any team. I'll tell you that right now. So the competition is obviously not the same. But in terms of having got through what you've done with the London Ravens, inspirations. Who were the inspirations to you throughout your career, if anyone, be it coaches, players, family members, who would have helped you get to where you got to?
Well, I suppose the first coach that I had at that first session was a guy called Llewellyn Gittins.
Okay.
And he was this big ex-tight end, big black guy, jazz drummer from New York.
All right.
Oh, wow.
And he was the most loving man. And he kind of taught me, I never heard him really raise his voice to anybody. I mean, he was a big, scary black man.
But calm.
Didn't need to.
Yeah.
But very chilled, and very giving. And so for me as a young guy, growing up and looking at how to be a black man, you know, he was a real inspiration to me. And, you know, when he had his children would come and see how he was with
a good family kind of vibe.
Yeah, so it was a good model, and his wife was involved, and she was a dancer, and she worked with, she put together our cheerleaders. So as a coach, he was a real inspiration to me. But many of the guys that I played with, he probably wouldn't thank me for it, and he probably doesn't know, because his grumpiest man that I know is Leroy Slew. You know, Slew is his grandson is a very good safety. Now playing for it's his first year in the Premiership. He played this year. But Leroy was a phenomenal inside linebacker, and again. He never took a step backwards. He never appeared to be afraid.
Go get it kind of mentality.
But again, a very community orientated guy. I think I was once on a bus with him when a fight broke out. Some guys really wanted to tear up the place, and they pull out knives. And he was a guy like Jim Brown. He said something to them like, gentlemen, if you
took that approach, if
you'd like to I think if you take your seats, you'll find we could all get along and get to our destination.
It's not always got to be that violent. Yeah.
I love that, though.
Yeah.
Did it work?
Yeah.
I think it would, because I think that's not something people are expecting.
Yeah.
So when you get hit with that, it's like, oh, do you know what? I think I might just sit down.
And I don't want to cause trouble.
And I don't want to.
No.
Yeah,
He's a nice
exactly.
Yeah, he is a super nice guy. But
Talk-
he wouldn't mess though.
Talk about obviously winning titles with the London Ravens, because I was at a game the other day between the Blitz and Warriors, and there were a few guys there from the Ravens, and I listened into the conversation. They had their rings, they were all celebrating like, oh, I didn't know you were going to be here, didn't know you were going to be here, and it was like a reunion. What was it like back in the, I like to call the glory days, where we were filling out Wembley, we were sponsored by Budweiser, we had all these bowls. What describe that feeling of winning a championship, knowing how much work you guys have put in, the guys you've beat for that position to get to that position, and being able to, tip your hat off and be like, look, I did this my way, and I own this ring, I own this win.
Yeah. I think one thing that I'd say to start with, I feel very sad for players nowadays. And when I came back to coaching in 2004, 2005, I was astonished by what happened to the game. That mostly, where's the crowd?
Oh man, listen, we've been banging that drum.
We're still trying to find the answer to that one ourselves.
Because when I won, when we won a game, there's thousands of people in the stand. When we win a game at home, there's thousands of people in the stand. And you could go to any number of grounds. You go Birmingham, you go Manchester, you go Leicester. The stands are full.
Yeah.
Family are there.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and so the pride you feel is it can be terrifying, but you're going out there to represent, and you're going out there with a sense of there's some people.
Yeah, you carry them on your shoulders almost, right? You don't want to let them down.
Yeah. So so rings and all of that stuff. It's good, but the things that I really remember, the deafening sound. I remember looking up and seeing people looking around, and being a cornerback. Yeah. Man, you hear it.
Hard position to play.
Yeah. So you're on the sideline. And if you're on the opposition sideline,
So what makes you think? What's the reason behind the lack of fans or engagement or people caring? I guess.
I think something that we said earlier about the product has changed.
Yes, it has.
It has. So it was much harder. The game really attracted athletes.
Yeah.
It attracted the best athletes. There's some really good guys playing now. I don't want to take anything away from these guys, but we were athletes playing American football, where now there's a lot of guys who are American football players who are trying to become athletes, who are now having to work on their athleticism. Whereas, I already ran, 4.4.45. I ran 10.7.
You had it
100
in you.
meters.
Yeah.
I'd done the work to create the body, to create, and then it was about learning the game.
It's interesting because you mentioned how back then, basically, it was a better product essentially, and you could see the people who were playing the sport were athletes like yourself, and that attracted people like NFL players who would come to the UK for different reasons and would attend practice. So much so that you ended up at a DB clinic with the Dan Marino, which is, again, we can't say that name lightly. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, that was a fantastic day. It was it came a little bit out of the blue. Americans. Because we had sponsors, when your sponsors are Coca-Cola, Budweiser, and all of that, I think it was actually Budweiser who sponsored him to come over.
Right.
But they paid for them to come over. Him and Don Strock.
Oh yes.
And they were going to run a clinic for wide receivers and quarterbacks, and then they realised, okay, actually we need a set of DBs, and so they asked the Ravens DBs to come and play all day, and so it was. It's something when you realise, hang on a second, the guy throwing the ball, and the first realisation was you could hear the ball coming.
That bullet pass.
He made this noise ripping through the air. there's a terrible photograph of me there, and I'm wearing some goalkeeper's gloves. And the reason I'm wearing goalkeeper's gloves is because I was desperate to get an interception. And I got my hand on one of the balls and it pulled two of my fingers out of the socket. But I wasn't coming off.
Yeah.
I didn't want to come,
Look, Dan Marino said, I'm going nowhere.
And I'm picking it up.
So I put it back in the socket and some kid gave me some goalkeeping gloves to put on over the top of it. And I hadn't taken them off when they went to take the photographs. But no, it was special to have that kind of interest and to have... one thing I've always found with athletes, with NFL players, they're tremendously generous with their time.
Right.
And they spent, the clinic, lasted hours. Guys, as I said, they were interested in us. They'd come to Hyde Park where we were training, and they'd hang out, talk to us, teach us. Yeah. And so,
it's. I mean, part of me feels like I can see why, because at that point in time, you're talking about sponsors. You're talking about real athletes who want to know the game inside out, breathe, sleep, and eat the game.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, these NFL guys and coaches, they want to be a part of that. And obviously, we still have the London Games now, but where the game is slightly different in the UK, that attraction isn't necessarily the same. But I mean, what can you say? Again, the glory days of the sport, where I'm just thinking about selling out crowds and being at Wembley and having all this success, and looking back at the game, like you touched on it when you refer to coaching, and it just isn't the same. But on the note of coaching, you obviously get to coach different age ranges of guys and girls. Is there anything that you specifically go out of your way to pass on to these people who are up and coming in the sport? Maybe the ones that are looking to take the next step, or even the ones who are just introducing themselves to the sport. Is there anything in particular?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is to have a respect for the sport. What I mean by that is not that you just have to do everything that the coach tells you, but that you understand that you're now joining something. You're joining a community. You're joining something that's bigger than you. And it's good when you join in this. I was going to say fraternity, but it's also a sorority as well. And women are playing. But when you come together to join in this, you're part of something, and you're welcome. You can go to any ground. You can go to us, and there are people who want to help you. But the other thing is enjoy yourself. I had some of the best times in my life, with some real peak moments. I got to travel, all over Europe to play, to meet other people. But most important was, I'd love to. We'd go to Amsterdam to play at the end of every season. We'd go and play the Amsterdam Crusaders. Or we'd go and play. But the best part was you'd sit down afterwards and have food with each other. That would be something that we used to always do. After every game that we played, where we'd host a team as a rave, you'd put on some food and we'd all sit down. So there was something about being a camaraderie and about being a family.
Absolutely.
And so I would, I really would want. It's hard to say that to young people nowadays. If they come into a team, nobody's talking to them, and the game finishes. Everyone goes home.
It speaks to the brotherhood and sisterhood that the sport does give you, because myself and Selenkay, you still play. I stopped playing a couple of years ago, but even if I think back to when I started in 2010, you get so much from playing this sport. And I guess it's the case with quite a few sports as well, where you have the social side, you have the side of you that wants to win and wants to get better, you have the drive, the work ethic, and the opportunities that can come from the sport too. So I guess, looking back at everything that you've done, the London Ravens, I wanted to touch on playing the US team at their airbase, because I can't quite get over that. Having to beat these guys at their airbase on the 4th of July, which they probably weren't expecting. Just take us back to that before we wind things down.
There's a couple of things that I think about it. One thing that is good is obviously we won, but personally, I've never been hit so hard in my life.
Wow. Okay.
and I remember it was the first time that I voluntarily came off the field. Mainly, I thought I was blind.
Wow.
But I used to wear goggles.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
they were just covered in,
Wow.
in dust. Yeah, so it was really tough. But it was one point, this is not a good lesson, but where I was sad that camaraderie was lost, or the importance, the game was lost a little bit.
Right.
And it's because they put on a huge barbecue for us,
Right.
which we ate just alone as the Ravens.
Oh, right.
They provided bottles of champagne for us, and the bet was 4 cases of champagne.
Wow.
And they were delivered on the field immediately.
Wow.
The game was over. Big B-52 flew over the pitch afterwards.
Wow.
And
Talk about experience. Man.
but then
They probably expected to
their
win.
players, when we were leaving the camp, were at the gate on guard duty.
Oh.
Really?
Their players were punished
Yeah.
for being beaten by us, which we thought, which was bad. That's the only thing that put a kind of dampener on the day.
Yeah.
Because they were great guys.
Yeah.
They were really good guys. It was 13-12.
Close game, man.
But yeah, it was a difference.
That's interesting because, like you're saying, I kind of would have expected there to be the socialising between both teams.
Yeah.
Share stories, talk about.
Yeah. That was the one time that it didn't happen, and that was because that was where kind of authorities sometimes take things
Which
too
is
seriously.
a massive shame. But
Yeah. For something of that level as well.
But it's still an experience that can never be taken away from you guys.
Yeah.
I want to go back to coaching quickly. So you coach now, and the reality of the situation is there's not many black coaches in the game anymore. One, how does that make you feel? And two, what's your advice to the young and up and coming black coaches that are trying to sort of get their foot in the door when it comes to coaching in the UK?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to give advice. It's not easy being a black coach. Often there are stereotypes that people have of black folk that they wouldn't expect you to be an OC, for example.
Oh, yeah.
You might have a linebacker coach. Just in the days, like with a DB coach. Just in the days, like I talked to a lot of soccer coaches, football coaches, and they talk about similarly about I was a central midfielder, but they always played me on the wing, and all that kind of stuff. But and the higher up you go in American football in this country, the whiter it gets. When you get to GB,
just look around.
Where the coaches are. The dominant players, the great players in this country have been overrepresented by people who look like me. We're being, it's an area where we've been greatly over. But and there's always been an issue of a few years back. Two of the greats of the game, both in the Hall of Fame, were the only two coaches at GB. Jeremy and Neo. And they got dropped without even a phone call.
We had them on the show. We had them on the show.
And it's still a problem in the game. It's still a problem in the game. So there's a problem. But what I would say to black coaches is learn your stuff. Get your qualifications. Don't be a YouTube coach. Don't be just somebody with a huge just doing drills but not understanding the spirit of them. I was just talking about one of the things that as a coach that I've always been concerned with. One thing I always noticed from the American coaches from the NFL who coached me was how simple they made everything.
Right.
They weren't interested in showing how knowledgeable they were, how brilliant they were, how great they were, how technical they were. They were interested in me getting the message. They were interested in me enjoying it. They were interested in me understanding it. And so they said very little. They didn't talk a lot. They let you do it, and they corrected where they needed to. Just one thing at a time. They didn't give you a long lecture. Which I see a lot of British coaches get caught up in doing to show, you know. I know. I can tell you. So I would encourage people to think about. Obviously, you know, my background, I'm a psychologist and therapist. To think about the mental side of the game. I just talking to Coach Jonathan, about if your linebackers can't hit because they're afraid, that's your fault.
It is.
How do you teach people to overcome their fears? Now, there's a lot in my profession that helps you in doing that. When I was coaching GB, I wrote a mental handbook for coaches. With lots about the mental skills that you need in American football. In different positions. So I would say to any coach, don't overlook that side of the game, because it's often the bit that makes it the difference.
Coach, it's been an absolute pleasure. We can see the light starting to fade. If we could, we'd be here all night. We didn't get to touch on things such as your profession, because that ties in very well with what we're talking about here. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here at the Big Kids Foundation, a London Ravens legend. You've done so much for the game, and you continue to give back to the game, and we thank you for that. Until then, guys, we've been here at the Big Kids Foundation. Stay tuned, and we've got some more coming for you soon.